pronounced Miliwake, which is Algonquin for the good land. I think one of the most interesting aspects of Milwaukee is the fact that it's the only major American city to have ever elected 3 socialist mayors.
Does this guy know how to party or what?
You heard it here first.
You're listening to The Rundown Live with Kriston Harris and Mike McKesney. The destroyer of fake news.
And that's why the elites do rituals on a full moon, because the full moon is when the subconscious mind is wide open and easily accessible. When we expose ourselves to harmful information and even videos and images on a full moon when the subconscious mind is open, we are creating traumas inside of our subconscious mind that will stay there for a very long time. They create shadows that we never asked for, wounds that we need to heal, and therefore they program us with harmful things inside of our minds during this time to make us desensitized to harmful actions. The full moon is the period of the month where the ancients would no longer indulge in anything addictive. They would never eat food. They would always fast and do meditations on this day because the subconscious is easily accessible and addictions can become very easily attained during this period of the month. In order to take advantage of the full moon,
We're hours away from the total lunar eclipse, and suddenly the prophecy only a few ever understood is finally waking people up.
Yesterday, the Sea of Galilee in Israel suddenly turned blood red. Even CNN reported it. The entire lake looked as if it had been covered in blood, instantly reminding people of the plagues of Pharaoh from the Bible in 2025. The Middle East is already on edge, but this event feels like pouring gasoline on the fire. Scientists say it could be an algae bloom or some kind of chemical reaction in the water, but believers see it differently. This isn't coincidence, it's a sign. Many are saying it may not literally be blood, but it represents what's coming. In the Bible, Jesus said that before the end times, the earth would be marked with signs and wonders. And the Sea of Galilee, the very place where Jesus once walked, now shines crimson. Could this be the signal of the final hour? Even stranger, someone asked an AI Bible app called Heaven to interpret the event. Its response was chilling. This sounds like an unusual, extraordinary event. The cause is uncertain, but it is truly astonishing. In other words, even artificial intelligence couldn't explain it.
This is the weirdest thing. Hillary Clinton leaked email discusses the resurrection chamber of the buried Nephilim. She requested documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim. Okay, so here's what I don't understand. In the Bible, in Genesis 6:3, it says, right after the flood, basically, it says that, the sons of God came down and saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and took unto them wives, and bore children unto them. And it says that, that there were giants in the earth in those days. And the word giants in the Bible is Nephilim. Or no, the word giants in the Bible is Rephaim, which is the offspring of the Nephilim. The Nephilim that literally translate fallen ones from heaven. And that the giants were buried in the earth and imprisoned in the earth. So, what is Hillary Clinton talking about? Some obscure biblical legend about how the fallen angels were imprisoned in the earth, and there's a resurrection chamber, and she wants to know the location of the buried fallen angels? What? Help me, Lord.
No, this should not be happening. But yes, what the Bible warned us about may be unfolding right now. NASA, using high-resolution images of the moon, was shocked to discover several points on the lunar surface are turning blood red. Scientists panicked because the book of Joel had already warned the sun will turn dark and the moon will turn to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. Sounds like prophecy, but when NASA investigated further, they found something even stranger. These red spots are made of a material called hematite. Translated from Greek, its meaning is literally blood. Here's the problem. Hematite requires water and oxygen to form, but the moon has neither. So scientists were forced to admit this blood stain may not be natural at all. It could be the mark of some divine force, a bizarre scientific anomaly, or a warning from God himself. When the moon turns to blood.
Jeffrey Epstein was running an intelligence gathering operation. In my professional opinion, I do believe it was a honeypot operation. And I do believe that there is a list of individuals who did engage in trafficking, were given these plea deals. And in my opinion, they are not to be given victim status because they did partake in harming young girls. I do believe that Jeffrey Epstein was targeting many politicians, many influential people, especially in regards to economic policy, etc. And I do believe that it was possible that not just him, but likely Secretary Clinton, as well as a number of other people, were targeted due to.
We have to be discerning about the information that's in the files, why this information is being released now. We have to be discerning about our own reaction to the information within the files, because some people are extremely emotionally charged. We have to hold people accountable for what it is that they are doing. But on the other side of this, it seems to be a controlled way of directing anger. It can be a controlled way of giving people to give up their freedoms. If you start seeing things out there like a revolution and overthrowing something, take that as a red flag. If we're overthrowing something, if we are trying to take people down out of positions of power without doing the individual work, without becoming balanced, and without becoming a conscious, sovereign being yourself, you are doing nothing except for playing into the mind games of the people who are controlling this entire operation.
I want to tell you that one of the biggest things I discovered in my work was the existence of a supranational committee composed of 300 men called the Committee of 300, also known in intelligence circles as the Olympians.
300 people you've never heard of. They don't hold office, they don't give speeches, they don't campaign, they don't need your vote. And he's not talking about the secret societies you've heard 100 times. This is what the headlines never touch.
This is the committee that runs the world. Now, in my book, The Committee of 300, I name every one of them. This is not a book that talks about they. It gives you specifics.
Now, this is one of those videos that rarely stays visible for long. But what you're about to watch will explain a lot of the strange things happening in the world right now. So, let's get right into it.
Who and what is the Committee of 300? Well, I've dealt with that. I've told you this is a supranational body that knows no boundaries, respects the laws of no countries. The first time that they were publicly announced was by a German.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits? Putting on the Ritz.
Are you consuming adrenochrome? Adrenochrome is a byproduct that's formed when adrenaline oxidizes. It's a pinkish, reddish, crystalline compound in pure form. It is an actual medical compound that you can look up. It was studied in the 20th century. Adrenaline runs through the blood when you're in a deep state of fear for your life. Whether your meat comes from a slaughterhouse or it comes from the local butcher down the street, the animal knows it's going to die. It has adrenalized blood. It goes through deep fear.
MKUltra was when the Unabomber, who was a professor of mathematics, was a victim of CIA mind control operation. This is all well documented. So he was used as experimentation for CIA mind control, MKUltra, and then ends up becoming very violent, obviously, and disturbed person in the hills of Montana, and starts sending around explosive devices. And he had this manifesto And the manifesto that he wrote was all about warnings of technology. But his...
Even besides drugs, MKUltra is involved in a lot of psychological experiments. So not just LSD. Most people associate MKUltra with LSD, but one of the most expansive of the sub-projects is Subproject 68. It was by this guy named Ewan Cameron. Have you heard that name before?
No.
Cameron? Okay, Ewan Cameron. He is a psychiatrist up in Montreal in Canada, working at what's called the Allen Memorial Institute. And Gottlieb wanted to expand MKUltra besides drugs because he already had a lot of people doing drug experiments. So he wanted to see if there were psychological...
Is that who I think it is?
Yep, sure is. Did you hear he ditched the man cave and brought back the study?
That's so sexy. I love it when a man is educated and informed.
He is so dreamy, always reading books and investigating history.
Where do you think he works out?
The library.
He is so controversial, always talking about 9/11 being an inside job, the police state, constitutional rights, ancient history, government cover-ups, and how he thinks sports don't matter in real life.
Oh, I love a freethinker who searches for truth. I love it when he feeds my brain. What's his name? Kristan T. Harris.
And because of this administration, we are tonight a world divided. We are a nation becalmed. We have lost the brisk pace of diversity and the genius of individual creativity. We are plodding along at a pace set by centralized planning, red tape, rules without responsibility, and regimentation without recourse.
Madam Speaker, I have a few questions for my colleagues. What if our foreign policy of the past century is deeply flawed and has not served our national security interests? What if we wake up one day and realize that the terrorist threat is a predictable consequence of our meddling in the affairs of others and has nothing to do with us being free and prosperous?
To be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting. How? Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan.
Promise of being one of the most effective treatments for AIDS and cancer in history. Now it's gone, and one of the most respected research facilities in the country is being blamed.
Participation in a process that validates an establishment that never meaningfully changes. What if that establishment doesn't want and doesn't have the consent of the governed? What if the two-party system was actually a mechanism used to limit so-called public opinion? What if there were more than two sides to every issue, but the two parties wanted to box you into a corner, one of their corners?
Censored by the mainstream media, the destroyer of fake news, and your host of the Rundown Live, Kristan T. Harris.
You're listening to the Rundown Live, therundownlive.com, and I'm your host, Kristan T. Harris, bringing you information that you won't hear anywhere else. We are broadcasting live right now on Ground Zero Plus. If you've never checked out groundzeroplus.com, that is the home of the Rundown Live. If you look there, groundzeroplus.com, you'll see that we're streaming. Right now there's a free app, and a lot of people don't know about it because it's brand new. It's called On Air Disclosure Talk Radio, and you can get Kristan T. Harris and all the broadcasters streamed 24/7 to your app on your cell phone, to any kind of device you kind of want that uses Google Android, like your tablet, iTunes, or the Apple iTunes store where you want to listen to podcasts. You can get On Air Disclosure Talk Radio and download it to your phone so you can listen to this broadcast to audio live. If you want video for today's broadcast, we have a great guest joining us. Ron Allen will be joining us. He's an MK Ultra survivor and author. We're going to dive into transhumanism. We're going to dive into the MK Ultra and transhumanism. What more can you ask for? Not only that, we're going to talk about war in the beginning of the show before he joins us in a few minutes. I want to dive into that too, but I also want to plug real quick. If you haven't, there's a new social media out there. It only costs $1 to be part of. It's brand new. There's some growing pains, so it'll be just a few, it's starting to take off. It's pretty neat. It's called fringeit.co. This isn't a social feed this isn't a social feed. It's a place. It's a private space for people who don't fit in neatly in the mainstream conversations. That's right. You want to talk transhumanism. You want to talk robotics. You want to talk interesting things. Fringeit.co. Join it, support it. It's $1 a month, and you're supporting a good system of free information. So I wanted to go ahead and just dive right in and talk about this. So as everyone knows, we're kind of in the middle of a regime change. There's war going on in Iran. The president and like soldiers are coming out and they're like, Jesus wants this war. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? Let me get you the exact quote. It's wild to me, guys, the propaganda that's out there about wars. And I want to break down some real stuff and some crazy stuff. But Trump came out and he said, I've never been had more compliments on something I did. Of course, both Democrats and Republicans want war. That's what the multinational corporatists who are lobbyists are funding them want too. They want the war. They want money. The big military-industrial complex. U.S. commanders tell troops Trump anointed by Jesus to start Iran war, sparking hundreds of complaints. Yeah, what would Jesus do? Probably not war. Not a very smart soldier. Not a very smart soldier. Doing what Israel wants, probably not the right thing either. But I want to talk about Albert Pike's letter to Giuseppe Mazzini. That used to be in the museum, in the British Museum Library, and it was taken out. It was there until 1977. And I want you guys to think about this. Because when we're talking about programming, when we're talking about MK Ultra, when we're talking about a plan that we've read that is written in scripture. What is a script? It's the outline to some kind of theater or play. And how many of you are following the script? Sure. Here's Albert Pike's letter to Giuseppe Mazzini. And I want you to think about this. Many of you may not know Albert Pike was a 33rd degree Freemason. He was an occultist. He was part of the Knights of Palladium. He was a satanic Luciferian. And what is it that we're seeing? Oh, Baal worship, Moloch worship. He talks about the Illuminati in his book, The Morals and Dogma, on page 744, and how everything comes from the Kabbalah. Essentially that Freemasonry is a form of Zionism for the Goys, the Goy boys, the Goyim per se. So let's read this. I'm going to put it on full screen because I want you guys to understand the program. Because here it is. It has been written out for you. And I want you to think about this. This was written in the this was the Illuminati plan for 3 world wars, August 15th, 1871. For those that don't know, Giuseppe Mazzini took over the Bavarian Illuminati's agenda. He was, kind of considered the predecessor to Adam Weishaupt, another great mind. And if you didn't know, the Bavarian Illuminati had lodges in Italy, and they basically spawned the bloodletting organization known as the Mafia. That's why when we had Leo Lanzagami on the broadcast, I joke, I tease him because he's Italian. He comes from that family bloodline. That's how he got involved in OTO Satanism, and now is a born-again Christian, but still a 33rd degree Mason, because none of them agree on everything. They just got to believe in a creator, because the Masons at the end of the day believe in sun worship. Maybe not all of them, right? The esoteric and the exoteric, the hidden meaning and what they want you to believe. So we're going to see what Albert Pike just laid out for everybody. The following is a letter that speculation claimed that Albert Pike wrote to Giuseppe Mazzini in 1871 regarding a conspiracy involving 3 world wars that were planned in an attempt to take over the world. The Pike letter to Giuseppe Mazzini was on display in the British Museum Library in London until 1977. Giuseppe Mazzini was an Italian revolutionary leader in the mid-1800s, as well as the director of the Illuminati, which Albert Pike took over for him, and that's why he wrote Morals and Dogma, to take the low-ranking Freemasons into the enlightened 33rd degree secret teachings of occultism and sacred geometry and Kabbalism. Don't believe me? Read the book. He was also a lawyer. He was a cultist. He was also a Confederate general, known for chopping up bodies and sending them down the river. You know, the Indians, right? Nice guy. He also founded the KKK, and he's also credited for starting the Prince Hall, which is the African American and minority sect of Freemasonry. Don't believe me? It's in their encyclopedias. Here he goes. He wrote and not only that, to explain the importance of Albert Pike, he had a statue. He had a statue in Washington D.C. Last time I was in D.C., we went and rode our scooters by it, and they still had it pulled down because during the Kenosha unrest, I was talking about all these Masons that were in, covering or trying to do the Black Lives Matter marches. And I'm like, why are the Masons, a guy like an organization that's known for, I shouldn't say they're known for, but this individual has ties to him. So it kind of gives the whole organization a bad name. But anyways, what's important is what Albert Pike has to say here before we bring on our guest. I want you guys to think about this, and I hope it resonates with you. And this is before the First World War. This is before the Second, Third World War. But what's important is the Third World War, because this is where we are at. We're getting involved with. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the powers of czars in Russia, and of the making of that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agentur, or agents of the Illuminati, between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments, in order to weaken the religions. Oh, sounds like what we have now. Oh, interesting. Okay. So we'll think about World War I. Germany, you got Russia. We have the Communist Manifesto that was written out by Karl Marx. It wasn't originated, right? It was handed out by the League of the Just, or the Bund Society in Germany. If you don't know, that's where the Communist Party came from. And the Illuminati and communism is synonymous. It's the same thing. If you believe in communism, it's Illuminati. If you're Illuminati, it means communism. It's occultism, and it's a destruction of all religions to establish a world religion. The Second World War, right, must be fomented by taking advantages of the difference between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. Oh, this is before the term Nazi was really ever used a whole lot. Interesting. During the Second World War, international communism must be strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which will be then restrained and held back in check until the time when we would need it for the final social catechism. So here is the MK Ultra programming. Remember, Albert Pike was an occultist, and people are going to use this to program individuals, and they're going to follow it to a T. The Third World War must be fomented. Here it is. Must be fomented by taking advantage of differences caused by the agentur, the Illuminati, between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. Oh, what are we seeing right now, guys? What are we seeing right now? You can't make this up. There it is on the big screen. Albert Pike went on to say some more stuff. He said the war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the state of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on the issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. And what are we seeing with inflation in the world? We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists. We shall provoke formidable social catechism, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of the revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilizations, the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from the moment of a moment be without compass or direction, anxious for ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of pure doctrine of Lucifer. The pure doctrine of Lucifer brought finally out in the public view. Oh, geez, what has brought out Luciferianism into the public view, the ideal of Baal worship, the ideal of Moloch worship, than the Jeffrey Epstein files? The manifestation will result in a general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. Oh, they want then the Christians and atheists to have a fight, and then, Lucifer will be all that's left. What I'm telling you is that this letter existed, and it was held in the British Museum Library. This is from archive.org. It's also archived in different colleges' records, right? People have written in the late 1800s and early 1900s reading this and wrote about this article, right? You could probably go to the Library of Congress and find it. But what is the program that they're running here? Because this has been around for almost 155 years. Maybe my math is a little bit wrong. Yeah, 155 years. Not bad for an old dude here. Albert Pike's letter to Giuseppe Mazzini. But today we're going to talk about transhumanism. We're going to talk about MK Ultra and a whole bunch of other interesting topics. And I think it's really important that you guys hear what Ron Allen has to say. Ron Allen will be joining us. And here's some things that I want you guys to think about. How far has MK Ultra gone? It certainly did not end with the destruction of the records in the Church Committee in 1975. Remember Operation Mockingbird? I mean, what a better thing than having AI run Operation Mockingbird and censorship. You don't even need CIA agents anymore to exploit them, right? So, a little bit about our author. Owned by a public-private partnership of intelligence community agencies, secret societies, and outright criminals, Ron is subjected to one of the many new psychic technology-based slaveries ignored by law enforcement and mainstream media, this one being a strange carnival-like sideshow of virtual sex for which American voyeurs pay the price of admission to watch the big screen TVs. We are all programmed by television. I want to welcome to our broadcast Ron Allen. Thank you for joining us on today's program. And we got a lot to talk about here, Ron. Because MK Ultra is something that is very relevant. I think it's still relevant because of the fact that the techniques have not gone away. They're still being used. I saw it in the Epstein files, the way they identify these children. They want them young so they can program them. The heinous crimes that claim to be in there, the code words for child trafficking, amongst other things, and what seems to be SRA. We can use the word satanic ritual abuse. I don't care about being censored. Let's call it what it is: satanic ritual abuse. They learned it from a cult, and they went in and they perverted our children. The people's families, sometimes generationally, were handed down to the agency groups. They programmed them with alpha and omega, beta and theta, different viewpoints. They'd identify them, then they would program them differently. Some programs had multiple programs and backup programs and sort of walls to prevent people from finding things out, and even end-of-life programs. Welcome to Broadcast, Ron. I'm glad that we could have you today.
Well, good morning, Kristen. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem, man. So let's talk a little bit. Who is Ron Allen? We know you're an MK Ultra survivor, but I kind of want our listeners to know your story and where this all started for you. So maybe first explain a little bit to our listeners who you are, your background, and how the heck did you get involved in something called MK Ultra?
Well, MK Ultra started in 1953, and that's when I started. I was born in September of 53, and coincidentally, I was in Pennsylvania, which is a hot spot for that sort of thing. And the person that was the administrator of the psych ward at the hospital that I was born at, Aaron T. Beck, was part of the MK Ultra program. He was a He was working with the what they call phantom itch, which is, if your arm gets blown off during battle and afterward your elbow itches. It's a psychological thing that happens. So they were doing all these explorations on the soldiers coming back from the Korean War. And I just happened to be at that hospital. I don't think it was a coincidence, but there it was. And my mother didn't even get an opportunity to see me. They took me away for my first 10 days. And that's where I've had recurring dreams about at that time. And I've seen the doctor, this Aaron T. Beck. That's how I found out who it was, doing a research on the uh, Valley Forge Army Hospital and seeing that it was indeed this same individual that was in my dream. But he was looking at me in my dream and saw me as a baby, and or I knew I was a baby. And he goes, "Oh no, he's woken up." And since then, I've had other dreams where I was laying on a metal. I don't know if it was a gurney or table or whatever, but quivering, like shivering. And I thought, well, that's natural. A little baby, a newborn baby on a metal slab in cold hospitals, it's going to be cold. But then I realized that it was a rhythm, that it wasn't shivering, it was being shocked, electric shock therapy. And I've seen one of those and I would like to see it again. I haven't been able to re-find it, but I just wonder if that wasn't me. But that was where it started. Is that good, or you want me to
Yeah,
keep?
no, keep going. So like you kind of get recruited. What is the recruitment process like? And is it something that they had to do testing for you or with you? What kind of testing? What were some of the things that you experienced when you first started, and how did they sell it to you? Like, because anytime you want to get involved into a program like that, there has to be some kind of convincing. Like, I'm not going to go and just be part of something unless I believe in it. And I guess in that era, you had like the GI Joe dolls coming out. There's a lot of programming, pro Americana. What are some of the things that really impacted the decision to be involved in something like this?
Well, like I say, I was a newborn baby, and my parents were involved. My father was a um, up up and coming. He was a scientist for the Navy. Onboard radar was his thing. Mr. Lockheed called my father Mr. Radar, but he uh, or my mother. My mother was a nurse's aide. They called them gray ladies in the Navy. They called them candy stripers in the outside world. But I think it would have been her like decision or whatever. But um, and then when I was about 5 years old, I remember being taken to the hospital. It was all Navy hospitals. And I asked my mother, I was upset. I didn't know why, but I was upset that I had to go to the hospital and none of my other four or three older brothers had to go. Why just me? And um, I remember sitting in a waiting room, and there was a administrative nurse standing behind a counter, and she was very stern with me, and that's all I remember about that. Shortly after that, I started having recurring nightmares of um, being chased by a bear standing up that didn't have claws. He eventually grabbed me, didn't have claws, didn't have a snout. And I started thinking about what does that really sound like? And it's not a bear, it's a Sasquatch. So, this is multi-layered. Uh, my experiences go pretty deep into all sorts of things. There's cloning, there's reptilians, there's, what I just described. So, um,
Well, it's
but
interesting because yesterday we had on, was it Chris Laterre, and he
no,
talked.
you did. Okay.
Yeah, and so we were talking about Camp Hero, and it's really interesting because when he went through a lot of the child testing, because I'm going to share a little bit of his testimony, maybe you already know this, but they brought all the kids into the room. They first tried to make them make a boat move in the water by themselves, and they all came together, and they were able to make the move. He said they definitely made the boat move. And then at Camp Hero, they put on a helmet, which he said made it effortless to astral project and to bring things out of his imagination into reality. And that's where I started to think about things like anything from like the walls of Jericho, the blowing the trumpets, people concentrating, meditating that those walls are going to fall and they come down to, to like things like bringing in things from other dimensions into our reality. Maybe they call them warlocks or sorcerers or people that have the ability to channel. But it's something that it seems like that's what they're looking for in some of these MK Ultra individuals. He talked about telekinesis. He talked about moving things, with his mind, psychic abilities, remote viewing. But this is a whole different, like, interesting aspect about MK Ultra because you're getting into cloning and transhumanism, which that's something I know a lot about. I happen to be an individual that really challenged a lot of the morality between mechanical transhumanism versus what I considered a biological transhumanism, which I'm all for living longer so I can read every damn book in the library and read every MK Ultra survivor book and learn and solve mysteries and bring awareness to the public and do what I'm here on this planet to do. I'm all about that. But at the same time, when do we stop being human? When we download our consciousness into another body, people say our bodies are containers, but this is I'm kind of rambling here, but I wanted to get your input. So how do you start out as a child? What is the training like? What are some of the things that they put you through as far as, like, you mentioned cloning, you mentioned Sasquatches, you mentioned reptilians, which you talk when people listen to David Icke or other people, they're like, what is a reptilian and what is a star seed? And I kind of joke about the whole trans alien thing a little bit with people with the star seeds, but I do know that there's indigo people. There's people that I know that feel like they're indigo children, and they're good friends of mine, and I don't want to discredit or take away from people's experiences because I didn't live that experience. So here you're saying that at a younger age you were introduced to a lot of different species, like you mentioned what you called a Sasquatch, or some people call them skunk apes, and the Arctic they called them Yetis, right? Maybe there was different types. They're all white, the abominable snowman, whatever that might be. How is it that you got introduced to, let's say, these other forms and other cultures? Because I've heard so many different varieties of the same stories. Just these people don't know each other and they're telling very similar stories. And that means that there's a pattern. Pattern means it's not synchronicity, that something is impacting and these are happening for a reason. And I really want to find out more about this. So let's talk about your childhood and how did you get introduced to was it technology that really brought this experience where you started meeting interdimensional beings, we'll call them?
Well, it is the United States Navy. The CIA is another one. And it's a lifelong relationship that we go through. Elisa E. and everybody else is trying to break free from all of this, but they get us into an area where we become psychic through whatever means they know how to do that. And it's, trauma based. Chris can tell you about the trauma that he went through. Mine wasn't, it happened at a time that I don't remember. My only link to back then is the memories that come up in my dreams. I call them memory dreams. But that's the Navy training, and they've been doing this for eons. They the psychic awareness, psychic driving is what Cameron, the MK Ultra in Canada, called it, and I think that's a pretty good description. Because after you get that done, then you can pretty much do what you want to do with the person. With the cloning, it's the astral that people are dealing with. Donald Marshall, who wrote a book about cloning, he had what he calls REM cloning. And REM is just, rapid eye movement, when you're just getting into sleep. And, but what it is they're pulling your astral body out of you and then using that. Now, I've had these dreams, several of them, where, and I it's my astral that's seeing this deep underground grade um, bases, deep underground bases, where there's both been nicely finished with cement, tile, and all of that, and dug out ones. But I see hundreds of people sitting in their chairs with their perfectly straight back and hands in their laps. Their eyes are open. They look like they're alert, but they're not there. They're like asleep or whatever. And these are clones, and they're waiting to get turned on. And the way that they turn them on is they put the astral into them, and that's been my experience. Um, One of the ones I go over in my book is when I was, this was maybe 10 years ago, I was in Oregon, and I had a night where I went to sleep, and I had this astral thing about having a person that, an old man, that I put my hands around his neck, and it felt like, sticking your thumbs into somebody's armpit, but that was his throat, and I was pushing on it. And then somebody said, somebody beside me that I couldn't see said, that's okay. He's finished now. But I was choking him. The next night, I had a, uh, because I'm visited in my sleep on a regular basis every night. And this group, and it's telekinesis, or I don't want to call it, um, just V2K, voice to skull. It's they're communicating with me. It's back and forth, just like on a telephone, only it's with thought. What um,
So telepathy is what we'd call it, and we have. The
Yeah.
military is obsessed with synthetic telepathy. If people don't
Exactly.
know, in 2012 they started putting together different kind of studies openly. So that isn't what they've done in secret at, like you said, underground
Right.
bases. And I want to mention that the things that you're telling me have echoed a lot of what I've heard from other MK Ultra survivors, that there's underground bases. Some of them explain like darker imagery of like victims where they breed them to get their adrenochrome or blood, like they're vampires. Other people mentioned what you mentioned, and it's interesting for listeners that don't understand what astral projection is. Could you maybe explain to our listeners, and how is it? Do you remember the first time you were able to astral project?
Well, so there's people that talk about being above their operating table and viewing down and seeing their body. I mean, that's an old story that I've heard forever, but it um, it's something that I don't have control over. I know that some people do, but I don't. I just end up out there, and it's a connection that I have. Your astral leaves you in your sleep and comes back and becomes part of you and goes into nothingness when you're awake. And in my case, with this guy that I was strangling, that I killed for the CIA, that was, they're working with me. They're not doing it with my permission, and they're getting me to do things. In this case, they filled in a clone, and they had the clone of me do it. And I was interviewed after that, the night after that, by a panel of like 4 or 5 people, and they said they were doing an investigation and they wanted to see if I was part of it. And one of the guys kept saying, I know it was him. I saw him. His DNA was at the site. And that's one thing about clones, is that when they make it from the body, that's your DNA that they use. So it has your DNA. And what after this group, and they told me they were going to do it when I was asleep, and we were communicating through thoughts. And after I went to sleep, I woke up, and it was 3 people. It was a FBI, CIA, and NSA person, they told me. And the CIA person said that individual, an old Chinese man, was needed to be done in. He needed to be finished, and it was they used a clone to do that, me or mine, and this is what they're doing. They don't necessarily have to have clones do it. They also splinter people's memory. They fragment their mind so that they can use a different portion of their mind to do that with a code word, to do the dirty deed, and then they turn them back into themselves by using another code word, because they've fragmented their mental aspect, and they're able to do the same sort of murders and things.
Well, they do that, just for our listeners. They do that through SRA, satanic ritual abuse, usually.
Right.
And it's interesting because it seems like the military is commonly involved with all this satanic ritual abuse. But for the people out there that don't understand cloning, I can go get my cat cloned, probably 20 years ago. Like, and it'll look like my cat. It may act similar to my cat, or mostly like my cat. If they can do it with animals, there's a good potential that they've already started to do it with humans and underground bases or offshore bases or places where it's legal, or even right here in the United States underneath our ground in places where we can't see, maybe hollowed out mountains. You think of all these different places. But the fact is you can go and also buy a genetically glow-in-the-dark dog from Australia, and your pet will glow in the dark. They can genetically mutate and edit these things to maybe create animal-human chimeras, like, Sasquatches per se, if you want to, or mermaids, or, Valkyrie, or any of these other mythological creatures that we read about in mythology. They have the capability to do this. I just don't know what the offset is. Now, you're talking cloning. It's really interesting because in the Jeffrey Epstein files, he's talking about cloning. He's talking about Britney Spears cloning. Right now, the whole Jim Carrey cloning thing, it's obviously pop conspiracy culture is reigning again 10 years later after it's been highly censored, and now all the information is getting out there, and I think that's part of the MK Ultra ploy too. But if you didn't tune into yesterday's broadcast, we talked about how the programs that they plant in people, they plant them with association of either an object, like a piece of jewelry, or and then they give you a code word when they bring it out, and then it reverts to that personality. And they also cause it so that you don't remember what you do unless they re-access that personality. And I want to tell our listeners something I've never said before. I had a 33rd degree Freemason come into my bar when I used to bartend. He used to like to talk, about the esoteric with me. And I asked him once, I'm like, how do you think assassinations happen? happen? He goes, well, you know, what happens is there's some prison guards, they get a call, and then they let go a horrible criminal, and he goes out and kills the person, and then they let him back into the prison. And that's how they do it. And somebody calls the prisoner, they ignite the code, and the guy goes out and he commits the crime. And then he gets the message on the way in, and then he doesn't remember anything. He's back in prison. And I said, nah, there's no way. That's crazy. This is like probably like 10, 11, 12 years ago. And now I'm learning more about MK Ultra, and I'm like, wow, this stuff is real. You know, the stuff that Fritz Springmeier used to tell at the churches when he'd go out to the churches. I grew up in a religious institute and a religious family, so that's how I equate the first time I heard about it in the 90s. But like, it sounds sci-fi, but then you start to think about these things. You think about using the Force on Star Wars, and how Luke Skywalker can get the lightsaber, and how they implant this stuff and normalize it in society through entertainment and Hollywood. And as we know, the magic wand is made from the holly tree or the holly bush. It's what the conductor uses to control the orchestra, and it's what the government uses to control our minds and trends in many shapes and forms. That's why we have these, what they call stars, right? They're illuminaries, because it is all illuminous or part of that kind of agenda of, ritualistic, satanic Luciferianism and abuse. And then they control you, and they've learned how to make these Manchurian candidates. And you guys remember the guy who shot Ronald Reagan? He doesn't remember shooting him at all.
Right. That's how things work. And there's another person by the name of Donald Marshall, and he wrote a book about cloning. He's from the Hollywood scene, and it was common, is what he's saying. And he's got a website. You can look him up, Donald Marshall Cloning. But he's getting into the details of, like I said, REM cloning, and that's your astral. To be able to give these pieces of meat energy. I had this one dream, astral sitting, where I was eating something that was so vile, I could feel it in my soul. It went deep, and it was human. And this person came into the room and to fetch me, and I was sitting there with other people eating this, and this person said, come on, let's go. And I looked at him and I said, whoa, how could that be you? We're sitting here eating you. Well, to me, that means that the part that I didn't see was that we or somebody close to us killed him, and because I knew him when he was not dead, and it was probably a clone of this individual. And here we were consuming his flesh, presumably cooked. I'm sure it was. I care not to think about that too much. But, even that guy that was the chef of Obama, they said that that's what probably happened, is that he refused to cook human, and Obama killed him. It's just a wild world that we find ourselves in.
Well, it's interesting because
all the time.
Yesterday I was talking about this, and just to give you a little bit about my background, Ron, I was a key reporter in the Ghislaine Maxwell Jeffrey Epstein trial. I was the only reporter at the trial every day for 5 weeks. I think maybe the guy from Citizen Free Press might have been there, but off-site too, because then he could use his laptop, because they didn't allow any electronics into the federal building. So I've had a lot of interest in this, and I've been viral recently for my research into the Epstein files. And yesterday I talked, or maybe it was 2 days ago, I can't remember if it was Friday or Monday. It had to have been Friday. I pulled up some documents on Thursday night, and I found out that Jeffrey Epstein was going to a seminar on what they call vegan cannibalism, or vegan vampires, to not drink real human blood, but either animal blood or artificial human blood, which, if you can develop clones, right? And you can just eat the clones, you're not eating the real person, and you can order Britney Spears for dinner.
I'm telling you, it tastes pretty vile.
And
There's something real evil real evil about this stuff.
So, do you think it ties into the ancient, like arcane rites of the Canaanites and Baal and Molech? Because they talk, the term cannibal comes from Babylonian priest, and we
Sure.
know that Nimrod was a curator of cannibalism and child sacrifice because they believed it would allow him to have he had ritualistic sex magic with his mother while partaking in all this. That's where a lot of the Crowleyism comes from. This is the legend, anyways. Like what do you see? Is it like a power thing where they want to drain your soul? Is it really a fight versus good versus evil? What is it that you are seeing? What have you learned from what you've been part of with these MK Ultra programs when you're talking about cloning and cannibalism? What would be the purpose and intent? Do they actually believe it helps them live longer? Are there people on this planet that are older than 150 years old? These are some questions I have because I used to hear Steve Quayle talk about, there's people on this planet that have lived for hundreds of years. I'm like, nah, no way. But now I'm starting to think, with this technology and what these people believe and what I'm learning about MK Ultra and the idea of the power of your mind and the ability of humans, they unlock the power of their mind. I don't know if anything is impossible anymore.
That's right. That's where I'm at. Things are changing, or things are being revealed at a pretty good rate of speed. And having a connection to the ancient times, you bet. It goes all the way back. They've been doing this, and it is evil. There's a force, call it what you will, Satan or whatever, but uh, it gives power. These people are like, I remember reading a book by Hunter S. Thompson uh, years ago, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and he's talking about uh, adrenochrome being something that was the greatest high. And, I didn't know what he was talking about. And now I find out that it's, blood that's extracted from young people. I don't know where they stop, but through trauma, and their glands secrete whatever that is taken into the blood, and they're drinking it. And it's common. uh, I keep finding more and more instances where people are using that, whether it's, at cocktail parties of the elite, or the British Crown, or the American, government institutions, or whatever. It keeps coming up. But it's a power source, but so is Christ. And you have your choice. And if you go with Christ, you're going to continue with the way that God designed this to be. If you go with Baal and all of that stuff, you know, what I don't know where those people end up, but I want to end up, through the normal method of reincarnation and so on. But how could you if you're eating your neighbors and your children and all of that stuff? That isn't something that perpetuates a human, uh, you know, uh, system. This is a very unique opportunity that we have, being on this planet, and enjoying our bodies and minds and others, and these people using it to do evil things. They're throwing it in the trash can. They're snubbing their nose at creation, and that's going to end up nowhere, in my mind. It's going to come to a crashing halt. I mean, I had my blood analyzed up in Yelm, Washington, by Dr. Anna Mihalcha, and she's showing me in her microscope that I've got a self-assembling technology in my blood. I didn't have the jab done, I didn't believe this story that they were running, and I really don't believe it now. And uh, and she won't treat anyone that has had the jab. But self-assembling technology in me, whether it's from chemtrails or shedding that's coming from people that have had it, that's what this is all is doing, is turning us into cyborgs. This is just a uh, a crazy planet that we live on.
Well, and for our listeners out there that don't understand what Ron's talking about, is that Welsbach stratospheric aerosol injections include aluminum oxide, and what you need is the nanoparticles of metal to develop or form some kind of network in your body, and it allows for what they call non-invasive computer-to-brain interfaces, where they can just download your information or communicate, or I would consider it scientifically download your thoughts. And we had 10 years ago, before he died, to me it's 13 years ago now, I had a professor who gave a speech at MIT about this and voiced a skull, and targeted individuals. His name was Duncan, I believe. And he talked about the science, and that's been around since the 60s. So a lot of this stuff has been around for a long time, especially when you start talking about cloning. Obviously, the Nazis had interest in twins and their communications. What is it when you think something and somebody calls? There's things that science and math just don't explain. And we're starting to find out that the world we live in is very different than what we are told and explained by science and rationality, that there's something completely unrational about the world, and it works in a way that the ancients believed. So I guess a couple of questions. We're running low on time here. We got about 8 minutes with you left, and I really want to talk to you and ask you your thoughts on MK Ultra. Do you think this program or these programs are still going on? Do you think
Oh,
that people are still being
definitely.
social engineered?
Definitely. I mean, it comes through the television. Give me a break. They're what happens to be at night. They're every single night they're dipping into my consciousness through my astral, and I'm a special case because they've had me on their leash uh, since 1990. This version, and that's been constant, and even in a different country. And now I'm back here, but it's something that will be rolled out on a grander scale, so that all these technologies that you're talking about are for control devices, whether it's CERN or what a harp or whatever. They're going to be able to do mass, and it's not even hypnosis, it's technology to control the masses.
Ron, do you think that you're still running a MK Ultra program, or do you think that your handlers still try to reach out to you ever, or have they reached out to you?
Well, like I said, every night, my astral is, and I think this part, it's the NSA. I think the CIA has handed it off, and CIA or NSA just works with maybe, different groups, neighborhood groups, or whatever. They can pull in people with a false cover, and then everybody joins in. I think a lot of people are hurt these days, and they want to. They feel incapable of doing anything about it. So if they're given an opportunity to strike at something, then they go for it. They want to feel good themselves. They believe what they're being told, and they want to go ahead and hurt somebody just so that they think that they're doing good. They're being sold a bill of goods on the television. All the wars that we go through and all of that, it's just all a bunch of hooey.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on the existing situation we have with our government, and what's coming out in the Epstein files? Do you believe that that the things that are being described in there, it seems like you agree that it's true, but I guess let me go a step back because the question I really want to ask. In some documents I've read, the body is considered a container. When you astral project, I think that there's some support that it's your spirit leaving your body. At least that's how I would describe it. That means that other things could come into your container and store themselves in you as well, correct?
Well, no, I don't believe that to be true. But as long as this, and I think the cloning is more, it's bigger than anybody knows about. Listen to Donald or me. I mean, I've seen hundreds of the cases, and what I've been involved with in my astral, in my clone, is pretty horrific. And they're, uh, these mad scientists are using all of us to do all these things. And where does it all stop? And what is it that's going to make it stop? I think just everybody knowing about it, getting it out there, maybe there'll be some kind of a resistance. At this point, I don't have any resistance, but the more people that know about it are able to, build in the new sphere around the planet, the thought of, pushing off evil. As long as the evil is pushing in and controlling everything, we're we're just fodder for this, uh, the bad that's going on, and it's got to be pushed back, and that's what needs to happen. And thanks to people like you that are having these discussions, bringing in these people so that you can expose it, and other people that aren't affected can see what's going on, because there's when the world I was brought up in is a lot different than what I'm seeing. And a lot of people don't have any connection. They've got a television, a joint, and a beer, and they're happy after their 8 hour shift at the salt mines. So then what? You know,
Yeah, they
Nothing.
really serve no purpose. They're just they're just like the elite believe. They believe that they're just parasites that eat up all their resources, right? And they don't really contribute anything. And I think that's why they
Right.
like the eugenics idea and depopulation and everything else. So, you're a very brave individual. I really thank you for joining us and coming on and talking about these things. I think it's really important for our listeners to read more on this. Can you tell our listeners where they can find your book, a vintage? It's called 21st Century MK Ultra Slave: A Vintage Transhumanist Tale by Ron Allen. A little bit what's in this book and how can they get it? I know I got links on all our platforms to it, and I think that it's something I'd like to pick up as well.
Well, if you go to Amazon, they've got a tab for books, and you click on that, and then just type in Ron Allen, Alan, and the book will come up. So it's real easy to find. It's reasonably priced. The Kindle is even easier, but I prefer to have a piece of paper in my hand to
Well,
read.
then they can't edit it, right? They can't change the physical copy. Nowadays, with the internet, they can edit
Right.
it, they can change it. And if you want to know the true story about what happened behind Ron Allen, and we got transhumanism, amongst other things, written in his book, and cloning, that I'm going to have you back on the show when we have a second part on this subject. I think it's really important. And I want to say thank you for joining us on the Rundown Live as we experiment MK Ultra. What's one thing you think everyone should look into around MK Ultra that nobody's talking about?
Well, cloning is a big one. It truly is. But like I said, it's hard to say this with a straight face because people don't know how to deal with it. But the reptilian aspect, I'm not so much into the other alien types, the white, tall whites, or
The
the,
grays, or
yeah,
then there's
right,
the
exactly.
Nordic types, and there's many other ones, but the reptilians are mentioned. And is are they interdimensional beings versus coming from
Well,
another
there
planet?
you go. And are astrals considered interdimensional? Okay, but I'll give you a quick story about the reptilian, because I'm dealing with the U.S. Navy and the government here from birth. I don't know what they did. The story isn't finished on that. But in 1974, I took some PCP, which is formaldehyde, okay, what they put into bodies to replace the blood when people die. And it it's a psychedelic. I wouldn't advise it. It's not really that great. It gives you a little euphoria, but you're disassociated with the planet Earth. And I don't do any drugs or alcohol or smokes anything now. I just I'm way on to other things. But here in '74, I had a large dose, and I went into the bathroom, and I never liked going into the bathroom on psychedelics because your face would do all these weird things,
Look in the mirror, that's the worst thing you could do.
Right. So I go in and I look in the mirror, and in 1974, I never even heard of this before, but there was a crocodile head on a looked like a Star Wars kind of uniform or whatever. And I'm looking at that, and I'm, like, yeah. And then the reptilian flinched. He went like that and turned into me immediately. And all I can derive from that was that at first he didn't uh, he didn't think anything was different, and then he realized that I could see him,
That's
and then he
interesting.
went.
I used to have this conversation with my friend. I used to live in a home that we deemed haunted, and I always asked her, "Do you believe that when we open up cupboards or somebody in another dimension, it's like, damn ghosts, who keeps opening up my cupboards, right? Who keeps like you move around, you pull the bed sheets off in their dimension, the bed sheets get pulled off. There's no one around, and they're like, what's going on? But it's a real question. It's interesting, and it's interesting because there's this whole concept of a galactic federation of light and star seeds, and I don't know how much of that is hype and how much of that is new ageism and disassociation by very attractive blondes that don't feel like anyone understands them, because that seems to be a very common aspect that people that are in that movement are just like they want to believe that they're misunderstood, so they associate with being from another planet, which I think there is potential for real indigo children and people that are involved in so these kind of things where you see or you have access to knowledge of the world. And are there other species out there? I believe that's what we're finding out. I don't believe if there's a creator, who's to say that he only created one planet with life on it, and that if there is unlimited dimensions like they're saying, and there's many just like ours. I used to joke that there's some dimension out there where Gandalf the Grey is real and Frodo Baggins is throwing the ring in the Mordor. So why don't we channel our inner Gandalf, because just about anything is possible with infinite and unlimited dimensions. And it's weird to think about, but in the world we live in, it seems to be almost of a digital construct, like that there's a foundation, and that if there's a foundation and there's this evil, there has to be a good aspect to it. And I know that there's a lot of end times prophecy and end times beliefs. I don't know if I call it end times as much as a program or the oldest script in the book that the elite know how to follow, but we know how the story ends per se. The question is who's going to make it to the end. Ron Allen, thank you for joining us on our broadcast. Tell our listeners once again, where can they find you? Where can they contact you if they want to get you on a broadcast?
Well, that's a tough one. I don't really give out my address, but if you contact Ilana Freeland, she's the editor of my book, and she also does other MK Ultra people, those that have had these experiences, like Elisa E., who you had on just recently. And others, but
yeah, she's interesting too. You guys are all heroes in my book. Anyone that can come and talk about this stuff after this abuse, because you guys relive it every time, even though that they've wiped your memory or they've cleared your memory, these things come back through just happenstance, you get memories, or you bump into somebody you know that might be from a similar program that you haven't seen in years. Just the stories are great. Thanks again for joining us on the Rundown Live, Ron. We're going to have you back to dive more into cloning and transhumanism because it's relevant. Right now, cloning is trending, and everyone thinks Jim Carrey is a clone. Maybe he's just getting old, and he's using different forms to stay young, or he's doing the adrenochrome, the adrenaline blood that they get from tortured animals and people. Who knows? Or clones these days. That being said, you can find us on Ground Zero Plus. I'm your host, Kristan T. Harris. Tune in tomorrow. We got another show. Drew Arnold will be joining us. And we'll be back on Friday. We have another guest. We're going to be having a great shows all week. Make sure you guys find us on Spotify. Joinfringeit.com. Check it out. It's great. And thanks again to Ron Allen. Go pick up his book that is available in the Amazon store titled 21st Century MK Ultra Slave, A Vintage Transhuman Tale. Boy, oh boy, what a great show. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Now, you don't know it yet, but you are listening to History in the Making while you are listening to this show.
We know now that